Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to join you all. My name is Vaidyanathan. I'm a professor of sociology at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., where I normally live. At the moment, even though it looks like I'm coming to you from a war-torn country to ask you for military support, I'm actually at the Vatican, and my connection here is also unstable, so hopefully it won't be too glitchy. But I want to tell you a little bit about two studies that are relevant to beautiful business. I'm jumping right into sharing these slides, and hopefully you all can see the slides up. And so to tell you about a couple of things, that my starting point for what I want to say is Psalm 8. And the psalmist says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you're mindful of them, mortals that you care for them?" Science is an endeavor, a field of work that often responds to this sort of question that really does probe the heavens and look at the heavens. And scientists are people who are struck by the beauty and awe of natural phenomena, whether it's the heavens or microscopic phenomena or even bacteria or even bugs, and they find in them, beauty and even love is a product of that encounter with beauty, as Peter was saying. And so I have been interested in the last few years in trying to understand what beauty means to scientists. And I've conducted the world's first empirical study, the first sociological study of the role of beauty in science. And it's a study that was done in 4 countries, in the US, the UK, Italy, and India. And we surveyed more than 3,500 physicists and biologists and did 200 and something in-depth interviews with them. And I'll tell you very briefly what I found in trying to look at what beauty means to scientists and whether it draws them to that sentiment that was expressed by the psalmist, and that sense of awe, that sense of really encountering the vastness of the created order and something pulling them out of themselves and perhaps even pointing them to God. What I found is that there are 3 types of beauty in science. And the first is what I'd call sensory beauty. And this is like the visual beauty that you saw in that image, which was from the James Webb Space Telescope recently. Also the beauty of things under the microscope, the beauty of animals and so forth. And that is something that 75% of scientists in these countries encounter in their work on a regular basis. And it's what draws many of them to become scientists in the first place. So it's the encounter with beauty that draws them to this field of work. The second kind is what I'd call useful beauty. And this is beauty as a heuristic or as a guide or a shortcut to truth. And there are many scientists who think that a beautiful equation is more likely to be true in empirical experimental work to be done later than an equation that's not beautiful. And this kind of shortcut sometimes proves to be helpful, but sometimes is misleading. So beauty isn't always reliable in this sense as a guide to truth. Sometimes it leads scientists down the wrong road or prevents new discoveries. The third kind is what I would consider the most important type of beauty in science, which is the beauty of understanding. And that's where scientists gain a sense of the hidden order or inner logic of things, being able to look behind patterns and appearances and grasp, this is how things really are. This is what's going on. This is the big picture. So that, like that watchmaker that Peter referred to, they're able to connect what they're doing to the big picture. And that is a profound experience of beauty. It makes their work meaningful to them. More than 70% of scientists say that their work is, according to them, a calling or a vocation rather than just a job or a nice career. And beauty also matters for well-being. The more frequently they encounter awe and wonder and beauty in their scientific work, the better their mental health, even physical health, their overall sense of purpose, life satisfaction, and so forth. So beauty really matters at that level of work. And the connection then is as I'm trying to think about whether this kind of work matters outside of science, we might also wonder about, in thinking about what beautiful business might look like, whether there's also beauty at the broader level in terms of what role businesses play in society. And there's a lot of criticism, of course, of businesses that have been exploitative and damaging to the environment. They're reckless with their relationships with the communities in which they're embedded and so on. But a group of us, myself and a number of Italian colleagues, for the last few years, I've been studying a number of case studies of Italian organizations that try to exemplify a beautiful vision for not just business, but organizational contributions to society. And we found that what we're calling social generativity has three axes, and the connection to beauty will hopefully be made clear in a second. One axis is the relationship between self and the other, and this is exemplified by a firm like Lochoni Industries, which is a manufacturing company. What this particular axis is about is normally in any kind of relationship, when there is a power imbalance, someone has more power, someone has less power, what results is domination. So the boss dominates over the employee, the superior dominates over the subordinate, the firm might dominate over a community or the environment. But in this particular company, one of the things we see as an example is this is a company that nurtures employees to build spin-offs. So they encourage competition rather than implementing a kind of not to compete clause, which a lot of other businesses in their sector would do. And they find that there's this empowering logic. So instead of resulting in domination, it results in an empowerment of employees because there's a commitment, deeper commitment to the well-being of those employees and to the common good. The second axis is the past-future axis, and this is exemplified in one of our case studies, Brunello Cucinelli. Cucinelli was the son of a laborer who saw his father come home tired from harrowing days at work and complaining, "What did I do to God to deserve this kind of punishment?" And he made a promise as a young kid that he would build a business that exemplified and upheld human dignity. And he's now become what's called the king of Kashmir. He's a luxury clothing manufacturer. And one of the things he has done is he's revitalized a medieval town in Italy from where he pays for the education of all the artisans in the area and ensures that his employees get to go home every afternoon for lunch and make sure they don't spend time working over the weekends. But his vision for his company is not a 3-year or 5-year vision. It's a 300-year vision, and it's innovation based on tradition that looks very far into the future. And the final axis is the public-private axis, and a company, 24 Bottles, is another exemplar of this. And they see their success as lying in their recognition as exemplars, and rather than simply patting themselves on their back for their achievements, they value being recognized by the community as an exemplar and other people being inspired to do similar things. And so what these kinds of generative organizations do is, we think, create a social surplus. Business is a creative endeavor that should add value and transform society. And one of the things that this abundance mentality reminds me of is
Whoa.
So, Brandon, we're having. I don't know quite what's going on. It must be the weather or something like that. Anyway, you just started going very, very choppy and silent. I was just messaging somebody to say, was it just me or was it at your end? So when you switched to the slide that had Luke 6:38, so just after.
Okay, that was the very ending. And yeah. all I was talking about was abundance, and the measure with which you measure will be measured out unto you, as the Lord says. And so rather than our short-term horizons, I think we're being called to expand our vision of the good that we can do through business. And with that, I'd like to, I think, hand over to Anita.
Great, thank you, Brandon. Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Anita Bennett, and I am from IDO Research. And we help Christian organisations to measure and improve their impact. And until very recently, I was head of research at the Jubilee Centre, which is a think tank in Cambridge, where we were promoting a biblical vision of beautiful enterprise. And the work we did was based on nearly 40 years of the Jubilee Centre's theological work and relational analysis. that good business is good purpose-driven business can be a solution to many of the problems that we're currently facing in society, including things like poverty and societal breakdown and environmental degradation. So all of our work was based on theological research, and if you're interested in digging into some of those biblical texts and verses that are the foundations of this work, then if you go to the Jubilee Centre website, you'll find a Bible study guide for small groups, and there are some verses in there that you can really dig into to sort of grapple with these issues. But I'm just going to share one verse with you now, one of my favourite verses, and it's from Micah 6 and verse 8. He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And I love that we've done recently in Jubilee Centre. You'll see why. So as part of the work that we were doing, we carried out a national UK-wide study, which is called 21st Century Pioneers, and it was published this summer. And for it, we interviewed over 40 purpose-driven business enterprises, which were led and influenced by Christians working in a wide range of different sectors, from micro businesses to large enterprises, and they were geographically spread all over the UK, in most regions of the UK. And these were businesses that were motivated by their faith and pioneering new and better approaches to doing business. And I think probably some of those that were involved in the study are here with us today. So I'm going to just share my slides briefly with you now to summarise at a very high level what we found out. But we were looking in this research, let me see, share screen. There we go. Okay, so excuse me. Is that working? Can you see it? Thumbs up, anybody? Okay, great, thank you. Super. So we were looking for evidence of ways in which these enterprises were behaving differently to others in their sector and practicing biblical principles. And just to add a caveat as I begin to go through this, it is rare to find a business that is practicing every single biblical principle to its fullest extent, because everybody has different focus and are all at different stages. But the vast majority of the businesses that we spoke to had made commitments to work differently and better across the full range of seven biblical principles that we were testing. So first of all, the first one is social purpose. And we found that all of the businesses that we spoke to knew why and what and how they were contributing to society. And that might be at the very source, creating ethical supply chains for themselves, or providing supported employment to assist those with barriers into work, and also being intentional about the kind of products and services that they're providing to ensure that they were products and services that make the world a better place. The second biblical principle was dignified work. And in this biblical principle, the companies we spoke to were trying to go beyond norms for their sector. So they're doing things like giving workers agency and autonomy to make choices, respecting them as human beings and not as economic units, and putting extra protections in place for those workers, and perhaps even things like limits to ensure that people were not overworking. Promoting diversity, celebrating, rewarding them, going over and beyond in the way that they did that, maybe giving staff extra days off in the year when it's their birthday and so on. Programs, when we were looking at, particularly for those companies that were providing supported employment, they had programs in place to provide like counselling and mentoring, life coaching, and helping people to plan and dream about what their long-term careers might look like. And then in terms of fair pay, many of the employers we spoke to are actually accredited with the Living Wage Foundation and providing the real living wage, not just for their own staff, but also extending that to subcontractors that work for them, like cleaning agencies and security staff. They're putting in place good terms and conditions, particularly things like providing sick pay for the low paid, and thinking about pay differentials across their organisations. And also just behaving responsibly in terms of how when they paying promptly and charging honestly. The fourth biblical principle is relational capital. It's quite a difficult one to explain this, but essentially it means that businesses take real care over how they raise finance when they want to extend and invest, and how they distribute their own profits. Not all of businesses we spoke to are profit making in terms of being private sector companies. Some were social enterprises with some charitable income and so on, but they were thinking about these issues. What came across being really important was thinking about recruiting, in effect, investors who have similar values that align with their company. Also thinking about employee ownership and handing shares to employees, or creating employee-owned trusts, and giving loans to employees that were interest-free, and also thinking about where their profits go and how much they give to charity, and supporting causes that align with their own mission. And then in terms of rooted communities, which is the fifth one, this is essentially about businesses thinking about creating local employment. So they hire and recruit locally. They enable people to put down roots where their families are. And also, in addition to that, it's about supporting staff to invest their time, treasure, and talents in things like mentoring programs and leadership programs, pro bono work in the local area. Number 6 was fair tax, and it is what it said it is, really. It's making a commitment to make sure that you pay your taxes at the correct level. And we found evidence of a company that had signed up to the Fair Tax Mark, for example, which is accreditation to show that you take that seriously. And also another thing that businesses could be doing in this area is to use accountants who encourage fair and responsible tax paying. And then finally, environmental stewardship, one that we're all quite aware of at the moment because it's very, very topical and really important for climate change. So this is about businesses really making actual commitments and pledges to reduce their carbon footprint, thinking about where they source things from, and whether those materials are sustainable. And also some businesses were actually developing a business model based around what we call a circular economy, which is about thinking about recycling products. And they had developed businesses that were actually all about recycling. So that's a kind of general overview of what we found. I would love you to talk about these when you go into your groups. Our mission really as a Jubilee Centre was to inspire people to hear about this good practice from what's actually happening at the moment, what's being pioneered in the UK, and for Christians to really grasp this vision and perhaps take some of these ideas forward and test them in your own companies and in businesses where you have influence. Okay, and I'll hand back to Peter, I think, now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandon and Anita. Really inspiring, and coming at this from 2 very different but complementary perspectives. So it's now time for you guys to put some questions, probably best in the chat if you can, and then we will put those to the speakers before we go into breakout groups. So Matt, I think Matt Parfit was taking part in the study that Anita organised. Matt, do you want to come and ask your question directly to either of our 2 speakers?
I'm very happy to, but I think Brandon's answered it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, you're satisfied with that. Mike, you've responded. Mike Clarko, do you want to come on and
Yeah, again, I think Brandon has given an answer to it. I mean, I think it's fascinating. I've not really thought about it. I can see I've got a resonance with everything that's been said, but that just makes me wonder what is at the root of that resonance, and whether, I mean, I know it's God. What's brown and furry? The answer is Jesus, but I don't know how. But it's inevitably going to be that. But I'm just trying to work out what patterns there are in it that actually make us feel, what makes us resonate to the sense of beauty in that. And I think that Brandon's given a good explanation there. I just wonder whether there's something more. So I'll keep on investigating, keep on exploring. But if anybody else has something to add to it, that would be great.
Great. Yeah, Chris Gillis, you've got a very interesting point there about defining beauty very broadly. Did you want to just elaborate briefly on that?
Well, it struck me that that our brains, Brandon quite neatly explained that our brains are wired to appreciate beauty in all sorts of things, symmetry, equations, Bach preludes. There's all sorts of things that we might describe as beautiful. And then when Anita was running through her list, it struck me that it could equally easily have been a slide on ethical business or social responsibility, even from a Christian perspective. And it just made me wonder, what might it be in the characteristics of the business that we're building or working in, or the work that we're doing, what might it be that would lead somebody to describe it as beautiful rather than ethical or good or very good or admirable? So these are going back to some of the things you were saying, Peter. What's the thing that tips it into beautiful? And I'm sort of grasping for that, and would be interested to hear different perspectives on what might make something beautiful to me, but simply ethical or fair or good to somebody else.
That's very well put, Chris. Thank you very much. Would our two speakers like to respond to that? And also maybe what makes anything of this distinctive of Christian business leaders? That's come out in a couple of the questions. Anita, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think you make a fair point, Christopher. I think it's people can label it however they want to. And it is often in the secular sphere labelled as good at the moment, because people talk about business being a force for good and purpose driven for purpose. I think why we decided to develop an agenda and call it beautiful was because we kind of went back to the roots of where this came from and God's design for humanity, and how he has ultimately flourishing and thriving in mind for people and communities and planet. And when you start to look at that, it's the idea that we as Christians can actually help to establish systems of justice and freedom for the oppressed, and all of that actually is something quite awesome and beautiful as a whole. And so we really kind of felt that we were reclaiming, in a sense, the roots of some of these ideas and pointing people back to the Bible and saying, yes, there's a lot of this going on at the moment. It's very prevalent in the secular sphere, but actually some of these ideas come from God's original plan. Does that help?
Yeah, that sounds great to me. Brandon.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add, I think it's interesting to explore this further. Certainly, as Peter was saying, the Greek root, kalon, is really the same for beauty and admiration. And I think looking to what we admire is a good clue as to what we find beautiful. And I think that there's something about this principle of exemplarity that is seen. So I think that you can have a lot of companies that are ethical in a minimalist sense, that say, we follow all the policies and procedures, but there are others that go above and beyond, right? And when you look at exemplars, even in the parables, like the Good Samaritan, he's held up as an exemplar because he goes above and beyond, right? So it's not just ethical, but doing something more, exemplifying what it means to love and to give of oneself more fully. So I think there's that surplus dimension to beauty. There's also, I mean, a couple of ethical principles. One is clarity, that is you see something and it really shines through, right? And I think that relates to this exemplarity, that something is a really outstanding case of what that thing ought to be, right? So when you think of a really excellent business, a really admirable business, what comes to mind? And then you start to look at, well, what properties does that have that make it stand out, right? And then I think it would be more than just meeting a sort of minimal set of requirements. Again, I think maybe the word ethical has been probably cheapened by ways in which it's used in a lot of the CSR discourse. And the other, kind of ethical principle around proportionality, I think also matters, where you see, again, companies, they're doing, they're going above and beyond. They're doing more than what there's a sort of disproportional good that is being shown there, I think. So those might be ways in which a Christian business exemplifies some of the virtues of the Gospels in some way, and also is sort of standing out and going somehow beyond the norm in some way.
That's wonderful. I love that idea of superfluity. So there's something in the parable of the Good Samaritan that goes beyond just doing the right thing to doing going beyond what's required. I think that's a beautiful idea of beauty.